we've all been there, asking for a raise, trying to buy a car, maybe even just figuring out what movie to watch with friends. That's all negotiation. And for a lot of us, that word can sound kind of scary, right? Like it has to be a big confrontation. But what if we reframed that? Today, we're going to break down negotiation into a simple, learnable skill. It's not about fighting to win. It's really about working with another person to get to a great outcome. All right, so to get us there, we're going to walk through 5 key pillars. First, we'll start with getting your own head in the game. Then, we'll shift our focus to understanding the other person. After that, we'll dive into making a solid plan, look at some advanced tactics, and finally, we'll talk about why focusing on long-term success is the real win. Okay, so let's jump right into our first pillar, getting your mind right. And honestly, this might be the most important step of all. The source material we're looking at is crystal clear about this. You see, a great negotiation doesn't actually begin when you sit down at the table. Nope. It starts way before that, inside your own head. It's all about that internal preparation. So the big question is, where do you even start? Well, it all begins with looking inward. A little bit of introspection. Think about it. Before you can have any hope of persuading someone else, you've got to understand yourself first. What are your real goals, your strengths, and yeah, even your weaknesses? This groundwork, it's absolutely the foundation for everything else we're going to talk about. This mental prep really boils down to 3 key things. First up, think long-term. Don't get tunnel vision on just this one single deal. Second, you have to know yourself, like really know yourself. For example, do you tend to get a little defensive when someone pushes back on your numbers? Knowing your own emotional triggers is huge because it helps you stay cool and collected. And third, you've got to see every negotiation as a chance to learn. It doesn't matter if you win or lose. Afterward, just ask yourself, what could I have done better? That's the real secret to getting good at this. And here's a really powerful little tool for you. A simple question you can ask yourself over and over. What am I missing? Seriously, asking this one thing forces you to hit the pause button on your own assumptions. It keeps you from getting overconfident, and more importantly, it keeps you curious. And in a negotiation, being curious, well, that's a massive advantage. Okay, so once you've done that internal work, it's time to shift your focus. We're moving on to our second pillar, which is all about understanding the other person. And I want to be really clear here. This is not about playing mind games or trying to manipulate anyone. It's about building genuine empathy, because that's where true insight comes from. This quote right here really nails a fundamental truth about people. Think about it. When you try to force an idea on someone, what do they usually do? They resist, right? It's just human nature. But if you can guide them so they arrive at the conclusion themselves, suddenly it's their idea and they'll defend it. This is exactly why listening is so much more than just being quiet. It's your single most powerful tool for influence. So what's the difference between just hearing and actively listening? Well, most of the time, let's be honest, we're not really listening. We're just waiting for our turn to speak. Active listening is totally different. It means you're tuning into everything, not just their words, but their tone, their body language. Here's an example. If someone says, "Oh yeah, the price is firm," but they're kind of shifting in their seat and won't look you in the eye, that's information. That's valuable data. You're listening for what they aren't saying too. So at the end of the day, your goal here is to build a bridge, not a wall. It's all about shifting your mindset. You're not there to fight an adversary, you're there as an equal partner, trying to solve a problem together. When you approach it from a place of trust and respect, you create a dynamic where they actually want to work with you to find a solution. All right, so you've got your head in the right place, and you're starting to really understand where the other person is coming from. Perfect. Now we're ready for pillar number 3, making a clear plan. This is the part where we take all that good insight and turn it into an actual concrete strategy. But what do we even mean by strategy? Because it's so much more than just saying, I want to win. A strategy is your specific roadmap to get from point A to point B. For example, just thinking, I want a better salary, that's a wish, not a strategy. but saying, okay, my target is a 7% raise, so I'll start by asking for 10%, and I have 3 specific accomplishments to back it up. Now that is a strategy. So let's look at what's in your strategic toolkit. There are 4 main pieces. First, like we just talked about, set super specific goals. You need to know your absolute best case scenario, what you'd be happy to settle for, and, crucially, your walkaway point. Second, frame the conversation in a positive way. Third, communicate smart. Sometimes a good story about why this matters is way more powerful than just a list of dry facts. And finally, don't be afraid to make the first offer. A lot of research shows that the first number on the table acts as an anchor for the rest of the discussion. Just make sure it's a reasonable one. And that leads us perfectly into our 4th pillar, using advanced tactics. So if the first 3 steps were all about drawing up the blueprint, you can think of this part as the actual construction. These are the specific tools and techniques you'll use right in the middle of the negotiation to bring your plan to life. One of the most powerful tactics you have is simply being the expert in the room. It's amazing how much this changes things. When you've really done your homework, whether it's on salary benchmarks for your role or recent sale prices for houses in the neighborhood, your points just land with more authority. People can't help but listen to someone who clearly knows what they're talking about. Your preparation itself becomes a tool of persuasion. I really love this military analogy that comes from the source material. It basically says, don't charge straight at the front of the enemy's army, right? That's a bad idea. You go around to the side where they're less defended. In a negotiation, this means if the other person is absolutely stuck on one point, like price, don't just keep banging your head against that wall. Maybe you can go around and find a different angle. You could negotiate things like the timeline or the payment schedule or other perks, areas where they might have more wiggle room. So what does this tactical awareness look like? Well, it boils down to this. Be the expert. Don't be afraid to be indirect instead of head-on confrontational. Know when it's time to stand firm. But maybe the most important thing of all, you have to know when to walk away. The real source of power in any negotiation is your genuine willingness to say no, thank you to a deal that isn't right for you. And that brings us to our 5th and final pillar, which is all about focusing on long-term success. Because look, any single negotiation is just one moment in time. The real masters of this art aren't just winning deals. They're building strong, positive relationships that will pay off for years and years to come. And what this really means is that your ultimate goal shouldn't be to just crush the other person. The best and most lasting results are what we call win-win outcomes, where everybody walks away feeling like they got something valuable. That kind of outcome is what can turn a simple one-off deal into a fantastic long-term partnership. This next quote really hits home the idea of reputation. If you don't talk about who you are and what you believe, other people will do it for you. It's so true. If you aren't consistent and clear about your values and how you do business, people will fill in the blanks themselves. But by always acting with integrity, you build a reputation as someone who is fair and trustworthy. And believe me, that reputation is an absolutely priceless asset to bring to any table. All right, so that's a lot of ground we've covered. Let's do a quick review of the 5 pillars we've built together today. Just remember this simple flow. First, it all starts with you getting your own mind right. Second, you shift your focus to truly understanding the other person. Third, armed with all that knowledge, you build a smart plan. Fourth, you execute that plan with skillful tactics. And fifth, you always keep your eye on the bigger prize, building great long-term relationships. And probably the most important thing to take away from all this is that negotiation is a skill. It's not something you're born with. It's something you can learn and get better at. You've got the framework now. So the only question left is, which pillar are you going to focus on first? Think about it. What's one thing you can work on today that will make your very next negotiation a little bit better? Thanks for joining us.